In 55 countries around the world, the death penalty is still practiced. These countries have dramatically different methods, from the USA's structured death row to the tormenting system in Japan that drives inmates insane, and the brutal executions in Saudi Arabia. Starting with the USA, about 20 people are sentenced to death row each year. While some states have outlawed or stopped practicing the death penalty, 11 states still actively carry out executions for crimes like homicide, espionage, treason, and extreme narcotics trafficking. The methods of execution vary by state and include lethal injection, the electric chair, firing squad, gas chamber, and gas asphyxiation. 24 hours before the execution, an inmate is moved to the death house, where they undergo a full-body search, receive new clothes, and enter their final cell called the Death Watch cell. The inmate may sleep or remain awake, knowing what's to come. 15 hours before execution, they are woken up, allowed to shower, and given breakfast. They can meet family and friends for one last time, make phone calls, and meet with a priest. 6 hours before death, they order a last meal with a budget of $30. If their execution involves the electric chair, their head is shaved to prevent their hair from catching fire. Witnesses are brought in an hour before execution, usually consisting of the victim's family, but sometimes the inmate's relatives too. As the last hour approaches, they are walked to the death chamber and strapped to a chair or bed. The inmate is allowed to say their final words, and then the execution proceeds. As of today, there are about 2,500 people on death row in the US. Some of these inmates spend decades awaiting execution due to appeals, but that wasn't always the case. George Stinney, a 14-year-old boy, was once executed on the electric chair, too small to fit, sitting on a Bible. In 2005, a law was passed, making it illegal to sentence anyone under 18 to death. In Saudi Arabia, things are much harsher. Saudi Arabia executes around 185 people a year for crimes such as burglary, treason, espionage, narcotics trafficking, and even for leaving Islam, cheating, or same-sex relationships. They use firing squads, stoning, and beheading as methods of execution. The executions happen quickly, often within the same year of sentencing, and are usually done in public to instill fear. Inmates are kept in the notorious Al-Hahir prison, subjected to isolation and extreme psychological and physical hardship. Japan, one of the few democracies that still practice the death penalty, has its own dark side. Inmates sentenced for crimes like homicide, treason, or crimes against the state have no idea when their execution will come. They are only informed 1 to 2 hours before they are executed. This uncertainty drives many inmates insane. Japan executes about 5 people annually, and inmates live in strict, harsh conditions where they are forced to work for over 13 hours a day and abide by rigid behavioral rules. China, on the other hand, carries out the most executions globally, with over 1,000 deaths annually. Crimes punishable by death include serious fraud, corruption, political dissent, rioting, and espionage. In 2022, a high-ranking politician was sentenced to death for taking bribes, showing that even powerful individuals aren't exempt from the law. Inmates often wait in terrible prison conditions, where they work for up to 16 hours a day, sometimes awaiting execution by firing squad or lethal injection. Somalia, known for its public executions, carries out death sentences for crimes like homicide, treason, and leaving Islam. The methods include hanging, firing squad, and stoning. Inmates are sent to the overcrowded and harsh Mandera prison before their executions. Belarus, the last country in Europe to still use the death penalty, primarily executes people for crimes like treason and conspiracy. Inmates are sent to infamous prisons and executed by firing squad. In Indonesia, narcotics trafficking is one of the main reasons for death row. In 2015, 2 Australians were executed, causing a global outcry. However, the country continues to sentence and execute many for narcotics-related crimes. India, too, has its own death row system. In 2023, India sentenced 120 people to death for crimes ranging from homicide to espionage and aircraft hijacking. The inmates are kept in overcrowded prisons and only informed of their execution a few days in advance. Finally, there's North Korea, where almost anything can land you on death row. Crimes like political dissent, watching foreign media, or even listening to K-pop can lead to death by firing squad, hanging, or even more extreme methods like missile execution. Inmates are sent to brutal labor camps where they work for 20 hours a day, often dying from the conditions before their execution takes place. Their families are often sent to the same camps as punishment. Even though death row systems vary across these countries, what's clear is that the experience is almost always harsh, filled with extreme psychological and physical suffering.